Hashem yeshorim my mesamchei lev mitzvas Hashem boro biraseinu oyem Likudei Hashem yeshorim my mesamchei lev mitzvas Hashem boro biraseinu oyem Ay 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 miras Hashem tehoiro hoy medes lo
Hello everyone, this is the fourth in the series of Unforgotten Heroes, and today I want to speak about my first rebbe in post-high school yeshiva, namely when you can learn Torah without tests, Rav Binyamin Tabory Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I come into Yeshivat Har Etzion, known as the Gush. I'm 18 years old, and I came from a high school where I would say I was part of 5, 6 people that learned above and beyond what you needed to learn for the curriculum and for the tests. But I come into a yeshiva where in my year, there were 70 people like me. 10 from this high school, 10 from that high school. I didn't necessarily feel I'm the smartest in the group. Add to that the first shuir I heard in yeshiva was a shuir pticha, the opening shuir by the Rosh Yeshiva, my revered rebbe and mentor Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Zecher Tzadik Livracha. All the rebbeim sat in the shuir pticha, as did Rav Tabory. I understood exactly 7 minutes of the 2+ hour shuir. Needless to say, after these experiences, I was 1 foot out the door. A little after the shuir, there was a note that you're assigned to Rav Binyamin Tabory's shuir, and tomorrow morning he's going to give a shuir chazara, a review shuir, on the shuir of Rav Lichtenstein. I made a pact with myself that if I don't understand this, I'm out the door. Needless to say, that night I didn't sleep much. I understood that I made a mistake. And around 8:30 in the morning, I come in, Rav Tabory sits down, and he starts his shuir. The shuir was about an hour and a half. We were learning Maseches Kiddushin that year. So the topic of the shuir was Ishut Lelo Kiddushin. Can there be a marital relationship without wrothing the woman halachically? And from that day on, I never looked back. The shuir was a conglomeration of A, clarity, B, order, C, spiced with jokes, with stories. But at the end of the shuir, you walked out and you said, my whole life, I thought the Gemara was endless machlokeses, endless trees. After this shuir, I saw the forest. And from that day on, I never left Rav Tabory, even though I was in a shuir formerly for just 1 year. I looked forward to every shuir, because every shuir was exactly the way I just described it. And you walked out of there and you said, wow, this is not just a shuir, this is an experience. There's a little history, there's a little humor, and there's also a clear shuir on the Gemara. To this day, Maseches Kiddushin is my favorite Masechta, not to mention the fact that it's very practical in my work in Sohar, marrying couples. And many, many of the things that I heard in that shuir, I practice to this day. For example, as we were learning Maseches Kiddushin, Rav Tabory said that it makes no sense to have witnesses view the giving of the ketubah from the chassan to the kala, because it's a shtar raya and not a shtar kinyan. Namely, it's like a receipt that you get for an acquisition of buying milk in the store. But it's not a shtar kinyan like a get, that the minute you give the get, the woman becomes divorced. Meaning, giving it over to her is just a proof that the chassan obligated himself prior. And therefore he said that the whole machlokes of Edei Chasima, Edei Mesira, the machlokes regarding a shtar kinyan like a get, when does it take effect? When the witnesses sign on the get, or when they give it over to the woman, or when they receive it from the man. That whole machlokes has no relevance to a ketubah, because that whole machlokes is limited to a shtar kinyan like a get, not a shtar raya like a ketubah. However, he said, everyone does it. Why not do it? Doesn't hurt. And out of his sleeve, out of nowhere, he takes out a Rav Sternbuch in his Tshuvot V'Hanhagot, after introducing who he was, because no one heard of him, who quotes Rav Issa Zalman that says that if you don't have witnesses, the ketubah will only take effect a day later. And if it takes effect a day later, then the couple's not allowed to live together, because you can't live with your wife without a ketubah. So therefore, it's a good idea to have witnesses seeing the chassan give it to the kala, so the ketubah takes effect right away. I can repeat this because of his clarity, because of the way he introduced it, because he said there's a guy named Rav Moshe Sternbuch. It's not Abaye, Rava, Rambam, and then the Shulchan Aruch all living in the same base medrash. No, he lives in Har Nov. He's still alive. And then he said this svara, and then it made sense. And every time I do a wedding, I see Rav Tabory right there, as I, like every rabbi, make sure the witnesses see the giving of the ketubah, even though you can do without it, perhaps. I make sure to have witnesses for the badekin, because Rav Tabory taught that the badekin is one of the 5-6 different interpretations of what chuppah is, and therefore, since en davar be'erva pachot mishtayim, there isn't something that has to do with marital relationships that can have less than 2 witnesses. You need 2 witnesses even for the badekin. And I can go on with endless hanhagot, ideas that came out of a simple shir that Rav Tabory gave the Shana Aleph 18-year-olds, which leads me to my second point. He had a photographic memory. Everyone knew it. The man was able to repeat the shir in the same order that he gave it years later. I heard the shir on Lechem Mishneh about 3 times. I heard other shiurim from him at least twice, 3 times, like the Kidashto by a Kohen, how do you sanctify a Kohen, and many others. It was the same order. It was exactly the way he said it 2 years prior. And that's why he can talk to you in learning in any sugya. I remember when he was asked to hear a chabura at Rav Amital Zechet Tzadik Livracha. My rebbe was supposed to be in, but he wasn't there that day. So he asked the guy who's giving the chabura, what's your chabura about? So he shows him the daf mekoros that he prepared, his source sheet, and he starts looking. Yeah, this Rosh I know. Yeah, this Rosh I know. Oh, this one I don't know. I'll take a look. Oh, this one I know. So you would have come out and thought the man has a photographic memory, that this man does not need to learn. But the photographic memory did not impinge upon not only his love of Torah, but of learning consistently every single day. In the words of the Rambam, even when you get old, you should continue to learn Torah. Tabory had a photographic memory, and he learned Torah every day. And I know for a fact that he got up early, and that was his time to learn. 4:30 in the morning, he was learning, went to Minyan quickly, 6:15, came home, ate a quick breakfast, continued learning. He never stopped. He never stopped learning, though, because it's not just the knowledge that he had. It's the experience of being Yagea B'Torah. That's also important. It's not just, I know the halacha, but rather it's, I continue learning the word of Hashem. And the more you learn, the more you think like God, because God is the one that's Noten HaTorah. Rav Tabory never stopped, despite his photographic memory. So you may have thought that a photographic memory doesn't require you to continue developing and learning, but that was not the case, and I'll prove it. The Lechem Mishneh Shir I just mentioned. In the middle of the Lechem Mishneh Shir, he brings the Shita of the Rambam, that says that you should make Kiddush at all 3 meals on Shabbos. So we know we make Kiddush Friday night and Shabbos morning, but the Rambam says all 3 meals. Why should there be a difference? And therefore you need Lechem Mishnah at all 3 meals. Why should there be a difference? And then he mentioned a certain rabbi that he believes makes Kiddush at Shalosh. So I knew the rabbi, and I went to ask him, and he said, no, I don't make Kiddush. So I was very happy. I went to Rav Tabory. I told him, okay. 2 years later, he gives the shir, exactly in the same order. He gets to that point. He says, I heard that there's a rabbi that makes Kiddush at Shalosh. And then he points to me in his famous point and said, and you corrected me and said he didn't. That's a man that doesn't stop learning, even with a photographic memory. Number 3, when the Rambam says, what's Kiddush Hashem? He says, one of the things to make a sanctification of God's name is Diburo Benachadim Abriot. He speaks very pleasantly with fellow human beings. It was so easy to get along with Rav Tabory. There was no distance. I once tried to talk to him in the third person in English. In Hebrew, it sounds fine. Rav Amar, Rav Amar. When I tried to do it in English, the rabbi said, he said, do me a favor, forget it. His mind worked very, very, very quickly, which makes it even more fascinating how if a mind works so quickly, how do you have tolerance to so many people? And so many people enjoyed speaking to him, miss him to this day. Everyone got along with him. Neighbors that knew much less than him, Talmidei Chachamim that were on his level. He got along with everyone. You don't know how fun it was to once be in physical therapy for my back with Rav Tabory in the other bed. It was just an hour that went by. Oof! I can't begin to tell you how fun it was. Forget about learning. Forget about just talking to him. I left before him. I told the nurse, I don't care when the appointment is. You make the appointment and my rebbe Rav Tabory is here. I get a call an hour later, and the nurse told me that when he left, he said exactly the same thing. P.S. We nurses said the same thing too. We loved it. It was just an easy-going person that can get along with everyone. Everyone knew him, and everyone loved him because he was easy to talk to, easy to get to, and so much more. Which breaks my heart, because unfortunately at the end of his life he had ALS. And I told my eldest a lot of stories about Rav Tabory, not to mention a lot of his Torah. And right before his bar mitzvah, I felt that I want him to meet my rebbeim that are still alive, to meet the people that gave me the Masorah, because now he has to take the torch further. So Baruch Hashem, and we also went to see Rav Tabory, who was ALS, in bed, very hard, but Baruch Hashem, his lips were still working. And I could read his lips. And he was as friendly without being able to talk. He started to ask him, where does he go to school? Learn a little of his parsha. Rav Tabory knew all the parshas Baal Peh, sitting next to him in shul, and hearing the laning, he never looked in a chumash, and anytime the laner made a mistake, Rav Tabory caught it without a chumash. So my son started to learn his parsha, Kitavo, and Rav Tabory with his lips is learning the parsha. It was a sight to see. It was such a pleasant meeting that my son walked out of there saying, now I understand why you got along with him. And this is a man, ALS, in bed. Just imagine at his prime. And indeed, about 14 years prior, I took my wife-to-be, Tali, to meet him approximately a month before our wedding. And he starts talking to my wife, making small talk. After we walked out, my wife and I decided, there's Sheva brachas under the chuppah. The minhag is to connect bracha number 1 to bracha number 2, so the Borei Priya Geffen doesn't stay alone. So there's only 6. We have to divide it up evenly. But I want him to say a bracha under the chuppah. Baruch Hashem, we had the schut that under our chuppah, Rav Tabory said the 7th bracha, and he was matriach himself, together with his rebbitzin, Mrs. Tabory. May she live many, many more years, to not only come to the wedding, but to sit at the wedding and to enjoy it. Therefore, it's no wonder when this book, The Weekly Mitzvah, which is based on his chug, his 5 o'clock in the afternoon shir once a week on the parsha, where he took a mitzvah out of the parsha, he defined it, And that's the Lechem Mishnah Shir I just mentioned and many others. Written when he was at the height of ALS with the Kibbud Orim, his son Rav Aviyad, may Hashem given many more years, was able to do here was unbelievable. He asked Rav Lichtenstein to write a Haskama. And at the beginning of the Haskama, he quoted a pasuk, Pikudei Hashem Yesharim Misamchei Lev. The words of God make you happy. The pasuk that makes it forbidden to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av because the Torah makes you happy.
פסוק זה עולה בתודעתי מיד בחושבי על תורתו של ידיד נפשי. This pasuk comes to mind right away in my consciousness when I think of the Torah of my dear friend v'talmidi and my student Mishikvar Hayamim for many years, Rav Binyamin Rav Tabory. Hachen, the pleasantness, hasimcha, the joy, the halevaviyut, which is literally the heartedness, but it means the open heart. These are the fingerprints of the Torah coming out of Rav Binyamin, namely Rav Tabory. Anyone that spoke to him in Torah, he goes on, and many did that throughout the years. Chashmiyad feels right away, ba'osher, the joy, hakohen mi'ishiyuto, that comes out of his personality, uvasimcha, hagluma betorato, and the happiness that comes out of his Torah.
We were zoche. In class, outside of class, in the Beis Medrash, to this Torah. But I actually want to turn it on the other side and tell you an episode that's exactly the opposite. But it only can come from a man that, as Rav Lichtenstein says in his beautiful words, that has levaviyut. Purim, 1996, Tav Shin Nun Vav. Buses are blowing up around Israel. That afternoon, right before this happened, another bus blew up in Dizengoff. Rav Tabory gave a shir on Tanis Esther, Erev Purim. After shir, I think I asked him a question. He answered, and he said, walk with me. He walked out on one of the paths on a launch foot. And he said to me, I don't feel like Purim this year. I'm so sad. You know, Rav Soloveitchik once said, and he knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy that saw the Vilna Gaon. I had a rebbe that totally and utterly felt Imo Anochi B'tzara. I am with you in your anguish. Many Tisha B'Avs, I made the point that Shechina Begaluta, that not only did we go to Galus, but Hashem came with us. As we say in the Hoshanot, starting with the words Anivahu Hoshiana, Hoshata Elim, etc. Hoshata, Ma'amar v'hotzeti etchem. God, you said I will take you out. Nakuv v'hotzeti itchem. Part of the deal is I will go out with you. Well, if God feels that way, should we not feel that way? Rav Tabory felt that way. Erev Purim, he said, I don't feel like Purim this year. I'm so sad. And indeed, he can be brought to tears very easily. I remember him talking about the fourth bracha of benching. That was enacted by our sages after they were zoche to bury those that were killed in the war for Beitar. And Baruch Hashem, their bodies didn't decay and they were able to bury them properly and respectfully. And he said this in context of celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut in the midst of Sfira. And I remember his words. People have a question if you should celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, in the middle of Sfira. We say an additional bracha b'shemu v'malchus with God's holy name in the benching, because they buried bodies. And here people are living in their own land with security forces that are Jewish defending them. And then right away, He put in a caveat, and don't think I belittle burying bodies. And I'm going to cry in a minute, and he did, very quickly, telling us a story about how many bodies weren't buried in the Shoah. So beyond the jokes and the humor, it all came from a big heart that can feel the joy and can dance with you at your wedding, and at the same time say, Purim is going to be the most difficult for me with all these terrorist attacks happening. And finally, one of the problems in the religious Zionist world is that we think that in 1948 everything changed. What was will never be. And indeed, part of the Zionistic twist of 1948 was that change a Gullah's last name to a Hebrew name, talk only Hebrew, and many other things. And I believe that this is detrimental. If you don't have a past, you can't have a future. The single person that made me feel at home with all the Gedolei Yisrael of past generations, namely, the same rebbe that can quote Rav Kook and Rav Israeli, can also quote the Chasam Sofer and the Chazon Ish, and felt totally at home with both. If there's anything he taught me, it was that you should feel at home with everyone that came before you. And don't think the Chazon Ish and the Brisker Rav and Rav Elyashiv and Rav Shlomo Zalman and all those are the Haredi world's Gdolim. No, there are Gdolim too. And Rav Shach is part of my Torah world, just like Rav Kook is. The advantage was not just that he knew their Torah, he knew their history, stories associated with them, and so much more. To this day, my takeaway from Rav Tabory is daily. Anytime I preach a sermon, anytime I give a class, the holy threesome that Rav Tabory did is what I want to do. Knowledge, clarity, and humor. Not to mention to do so throughout the class. You're always on your toes and you never get bored. The minute anyone remembers Rav Tabory, as Rav Lichtenstein wrote, a smile comes to your face. That's the smile of Simchas HaTorah, of being happy and joyful with a Torah that's big and complex, but is pleasant. I don't think I'll ever get to the level of Pekudei Hashem Yesharim Mesamchei Lev, but I definitely will try, because God benefited me amongst many students in Israel, in Toronto, in Cleveland, in London, to have a rebbe that was able to do all three. That's the Torah of Rav Tabory. That's the Torah he gave his students. And that's the Torah that I hope and pray before the Master of the Universe that I'll be able to continue, with God's help, to teach in the manner he taught us, not only promulgating his own Torah, but promulgating the way in which the Torah is transmitted. Yehi Zichro Shel Gadol Zeh Baruch, to his family, his children, his grandchildren, and to his thousands of students that had the zchut of smelling his sweet fragrance of his Torah for so many years.
It's a great privilege to have students who combine Hesder, yeshiva, and army. I am privileged that I have students that surpass me, become greater in all areas, and I think that's the greatest nachas any person who teaches Torah can have.
ונשמח בדברי סוידוס